Senator Rice.
President, my question is to Minister Ruston, the Assistant Minister for Agriculture and Water. Media reports this morning, Minister, quoted sawmill owners in eastern Victoria as saying, "At the moment, everyone is in denial, but we're in wind-down mode. We're about to fall over a resource cliff in 2 years' time. There won't be enough wood for all the mills." And the mill owners called for logging in national parks and water catchments as an option for timber supply. Another major mill last week said their future was under threat because of deteriorating log quality. Minister, will you rule out logging in national parks under any renegotiation of our logging laws, the regional forest agreements?
Senator Rice, it is not appropriate at question time to direct questions without notice to assistant ministers. I will let the responsible minister take the question to the extent that in my decade here I have not seen questions directed to assistant ministers, and I think most senators know that. I'll allow Senator Canavan to take the question.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do thank Senator Rice for a question of government, and I think it's unfortunate Senator Ruston can't answer the question because I'm sure she'd do a much better job at it than me. But regardless, I will do my best as the Minister representing the Minister for Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries. Mr. President, up front, the Australian government does support a strong and vibrant forestry industry in this country. We support the sustainable use of our resources, including our forestry resources, because many small country towns do rely on this industry, Mr. President, for their livelihood, for their lifeblood. Around 67,000 people are employed in this industry, and they contribute nearly $24 billion to the economy every year. We are committed, I can say, Mr. President, to Senator Rice, we are committed to the regional forest agreements. We do believe they are the best way of balancing the environmental, economic and social demands to ensure that for the sustainable use of our native forests. We are seeking to also ensure that we meet our election commitment, of course, to establish a 20-year rolling life to each regional forestry agreement, to provide resource security and a stable investment environment to the forest industry.
Senator Rice, on a point of order.
Mr. President, I draw the minister's attention to relevance. My question is about whether the government will rule out logging in national parks under the renegotiation of the regional forest agreements.
Senator Rice, you've taken the opportunity to remind the minister of the question. I take the opportunity to respond that the minister took a question that was directed to someone who was not appropriate to have a question directed to them at question time. Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also note, Mr. President, there was a long preamble in that question which called into question the worth of a forestry industry in this country. And I'm happy to stand up here and support the fact that we do support those jobs, we do support that industry, and of course we support appropriate regulation to ensure the sustainable use of our forests. And that's why we support the regional forestry agreements. That's why we want to continue to invest in them and ensure there is a 20-year rolling life for each regional forestry investment that will provide sufficient security to the forestry industry, as well as make sure that we protect the environment over the long term.
Okay, before I call you, Senator Rice, I'll clarify the ruling I made earlier. Assistant ministers are parliamentary secretaries under the Ministers of State Act. They cannot have questions directed to them at question time. There may be some confusion because there was a period of time in 2013 when some ministers of state under the Act were titled assistant ministers, but anyone who's a parliamentary secretary under that Act can't have a question directed to them at question time. Do you have a supplementary question to Minister Canavan?
I do, thank you.
Senator Rice.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, Minister Canavan, media reports last week noted that the New South Wales government had concerns about the legal uncertainties about the now quite old comprehensive regional assessments that underpin the existing RFAs. Minister, given these legal uncertainties, given the wood running out, given no long-term job security, given threatened species under threat, why won't your government acknowledge that our logging laws are outdated and ineffective and that we should be completing the shift of wood production 100% to plantations?
Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, my earlier presumption was correct. I think Senator Ruston would have done a better job answering these questions, but I can confirm, Mr. President, that the federal government will rule out any logging in native forests, as per the senator's original question. However, we do support, of course, the responsible development of the forestry industry in this country, Mr. President, and we make no bones about that. I take issue, Mr. President, with Senator Rice's assertion that somehow this is not a renewable industry. It is. It is an industry that is appropriately protected, and it does provide a renewable resource for many of the products that we all rely on today. Because, Mr President, the Greens would have us shut down the whole forestry industry in this country, and then imports still want to use all their IKEA furniture and fancy Matt Blatt furniture or what have you, and that would all be then made from imported forestry products with lower standards and less protection for the environment.
Senator Rice, a final supplementary question.
Thanks, Mr President. I do want clarification whether you're ruling out logging in native forests or in national parks. But, Minister, the Central Highlands Regional Forest Agreement and the East Gippsland RFA are expiring tomorrow. As of now, we haven't heard whether those agreements are going to be extended or whether they will happen, as we think, should be wound up and consigned to the dustbin of history. Are these agreements going to be extended before they expire tomorrow? And if not, what's going to happen in these forests where logging is planned tomorrow and beyond?
Senator Canavan.
Mr President. And Mr President, I do want to take the opportunity to clarify and answer my previous question. Meant to rule out logging in national parks, of course, not native forests. Sorry for my correction that's required. Now, Mr President, I don't have any information particular about those agreements, Mr President, so I will take advice on that and come back to the chamber. However, once again, I do assert the government's commitment.
Order, Senator Canavan. Senator Rice on a point of order.
Look, a point of order. I know that Assistant Minister Ruston has been involved in these negotiations.
Senator,
they expire tomorrow, so can you seek advice now?
Senator Rice, that was not a point of order. Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Mr President. Well, as I said, Mr President, we will come back on notice as is appropriate when a question of such specificity is asked to this chamber. Mr President, as I said, we do remain committed to ensuring the regional forest agreements are the solid basis for the continuing support of the environmentally sustainable use of our forests and the protections of thousands of jobs in that industry.